What's going on with the Bengals?
Trey Hendrickson remains a holdout.
There's unprovoked shark attacks, and there's provoked shark attacks.
Obviously, he's frustrated that the Bengals haven't offered him what he feels he deserves.
Just to say the word respect, actions are speaking a lot louder in a different direction.
They have no shot without him, and they're not going to develop Shamar Stewart the way they want to without him.
The Cincinnati Bengals select Shamar Stewart.
Shamar Stewart, he's now left in the midst of a contract dispute.
I just decided not to sign those papers.
That's a bad look for the organization.
We begin NFL Live with the Bengals. They've spent some serious money this offseason. On March 16th, they extended both parts of their elite wide receiver duo. They signed Jamar Chase to the largest wide receiver contract in NFL history and gave T. Higgins a 4-year deal worth $115 million. But then last Friday, they locked up their rookie first-rounder by giving Shamar Stewart a fully guaranteed 4-year contract worth nearly $19 million after the contract disputes going on there. But as of today, there's still no deal for last year's sack leader, Trey Hendrickson. He continues to hold out of camp as he seeks an extension. So for more on what's going on with the Bengals, we welcome in Jeremy Fowler, who's live at Bengals camp. Jeremy, the first padded practice for Cincinnati. What's the energy and atmosphere been like there?
Laura, the Bengals camp is urgent and fast. That's because Cincinnati is trying to set a tone and get off to a faster start to the season. Get this stat. Bengals are 1-11 in the last six seasons in weeks 1 and 2. So Zach Taylor, the head coach, is hoping that his offense sets the tone early.
Well, we want to control the game, get on teams earlier, put points on the board to where defense can really tee off and build bigger leads for us. And so I think that's an area where we can always improve is get on teams quicker. We've had games where that's good. There's been games where that's not good enough. But I think the offense needs to be able to set a tone going into every game, and the defense can play off of that.
On the defensive side, Trey Hendrickson still not here, but the Bengals have been talking with Hendrickson. I'm told they made some progress in certain areas, but this remains a matter of guaranteed money, particularly later in what should be a multi-year contract extension if they can eventually reach it. But Shamar Stewart is here. He had back-to-back pass deflections in the defense and looked good. I talked to Zach Taylor, who said that he has tremendous burst and twitch.
All right, we'd love it, Jeremy. Great details there from Bengals camp. We'll keep an eye on that Trey Hendrickson situation as we welcome you into the show. We've got Field Yates, Mina Kimes, Adam Schefter here today, and a lot to get to. Adam, I want to start with what we were just talking about with Jeremy Fowler. Trey Hendrickson still not at camp. He's waiting for that new deal. You heard Jeremy's talk there about the guaranteed money. What more can you tell us is going on there with Hendrickson?
Well, that's exactly what's going on right now, Laura. Essentially, there's not much of a disagreement on the length of this contract, on what the average annual salary should be, but the two sides are having a difficult time coming to a common place where they both can agree upon the guaranteed money in that particular contract. The Bengals have wanted to offer 1 year of guaranteed money. They've upped their offer since then. They're a little bit closer, but still not where Trey Hendrickson would want to be, especially considering that when we look at the other top pass rushers that have gotten deals done this offseason, from Max Crosby to Myles Garrett to TJ Watt, those deals included 3 years of guaranteed money. And right now, Trey Hendrickson is not going to take less than what he has set in his mind. So the two sides are trying to figure out if they can find a solution to get Hendrickson back into camp. But the guaranteed money is the roadblock and the stumbling block between the Bengals and Trey Hendrickson finding enough common ground to get a deal done.
And Adam, as you've told us, Trey Hendrickson has no problem sitting out, so something to monitor. Mina, you heard Zach Taylor. He wants to start the season fast, of course, right? How much pressure does this Bengals defense face early in the season if they don't have Hendrickson?
Yeah, I don't need to tell viewers for the 100th time how important Trey Hendrickson was to the pass rush last year, how he really was the Bengals' entire pass rush last season, how raw their first-round draft pick Shamar Stewart is. Even though he's on the field now, I don't think there's any expectation he's going to be anywhere close to what Hendrickson did early on in the season. But for me, what I'm starting to get nervous about is the start, as you talked about. So week 1, the Browns, a little bit less worried about that offense. But I'm looking at weeks 2 and 3, the Jaguars and the Vikings, and I'm thinking about Brian Thomas Jr. and Justin Jefferson, along with Travis Hunter, by the way. We'll see what they get out of him. But I do not feel confident in the Bengals secondary when it comes to defending those two players. Their best chance of limiting those two receivers is a pass rush. And their best chance of having a pass rush is Trey Hendrickson back on the field. So you do get nervous about that when you start looking at matchups, at the possibility of him holding out for any length of time.
Yeah, Mina, let's go back to what Adam was talking about as the sticking point in this deal. It's the idea that the Bengals are less comfortable guaranteeing money for 2 seasons. So let's talk to what the downside could be if you do that in your Cincinnati. Maybe Trey Hendrickson hits a wall, falls off a cliff as a player this year, and you're overpaying him in the 2026 season. Let's talk about the downside about not having Trey Hendrickson on your team this year. You've got no chance. You talk about some of those matchups they faced early in the season against the likes of the Vikings and the Jaguars, and even week 4 against perhaps the best offensive line in the NFL, or near the top with the Denver Broncos. Think about playing meaningful football games in January against the likes of Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. Last year, if there were any team meetings between the offense and the defense in Cincinnati, Trey Hendrickson might have been the only defensive player that any of the offensive players could look in the eyes and say, you are pulling your weight, because the rest of the defense was not. So I understand these things are complicated. Saying otherwise, I think, would be disingenuous. But if ever there was a time for the Bengals to back off precedent a little bit and ignore the age a little bit, it's right now. The guy's been the most productive pass rusher over the past 2 seasons of the NFL. We have some hope for Shamar Stewart. But this roster outside of Trey Hendrickson rushing the passer leaves much to be desired. He is the fulcrum for this defensive front seven.
You mentioned starting fast and some of their opponents. I feel the Bengals have 7 games versus teams that ranked top 10 in points per game last season. So they need their defense to be better. They need Trey Hendrickson there. All right, new on NFL Live, some news coming out of Denver. Adam, what more can you tell us?
Laura, the Denver Broncos finally have a new deal for their wide receiver, Courtland Sutton. It's a 4-year, $92 million extension for a player who was enormously popular in that locker room. A couple of years ago when he got hurt in training camp, they struggled to replace him. He's become Bo Nix's most trusted target, and Denver got a deal done with him today, reaching agreement on a contract that will keep him in Denver during the prime of his career. The Broncos have looked at a number of players that they like to keep, but none was any more important right now than Courtland Sutton, and they now have him tied down to a deal that will have interesting reverberations, considering some of the other wide receivers that are still looking for new deals.
Okay, Adam, you teed it up perfectly, so let's go to the next thing. Speaking of one of those, let's go to Washington, where wideout Terry McLaurin still waiting on his long-term deal. He showed up to camp yesterday. You're seeing the video there, despite being put on the physically unable to perform list. So Commanders head coach Dan Quinn addressed the media yesterday about Terry McLaurin.
Terry McLaurin has reported, and we're very happy about that. He'll start the training camp on PUP for his ankle. So on the business side, AP and the guys are still working hard with Terry and his rep on the business side of things. Terry's always a serious competitor, but like, you know, a pro's pro in a lot of respects, Dave, that he's just handles things in such a right way. I wanted to, you know, really, I was checking in with the man, you know, the other side of things are there, but to make sure in the midst of all that, just, you know, the joy of here, teammates, togetherness, and he's built a lot, you know, with the teammates here.
Well said by Dan Quinn. By the way, Jaden Daniels' connection with Terry McLaurin was real. Let me show you some of the numbers. He threw 12 touchdowns to him compared to just 1 interception, averaged 9.1 yards per attempt, and had a 91 total QBR. When he was throwing to other wide receivers, numbers not even close. He threw just 7 touchdowns to everyone else and 4 interceptions. So just how important Terry McLaurin is to the young Jaden Daniels. Adam, what can you tell us about the contract talks in Washington?
Well, Laura, let's not confuse Terry McLaurin reporting back to the team with him being any closer to a new contract. The two sides remain apart in their discussions for a new deal. Terry McLaurin came in because, frankly, it stops the meter from running on the $50,000 daily fines that he was incurring by staying away from the team facility and working out on his own. Now he gets to work out in the company of Commanders trainers, around his teammates, and there is no $50,000 a day fine. He's not going to call it a hold-in, but we can call it a hold-in because I do not expect that we would see Terry McLaurin on the football field until he has some sort of new deal, which the two sides do not appear to be close to getting at this point in time. Obviously, there's a disagreement over his value, and I think Terry McLaurin can look right away at DK Metcalf, a wide receiver this offseason who was traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers, who got $33 million a year on average. Terry McLaurin was in the same draft class as DK Metcalf. He has arguably put up better numbers than DK Metcalf. He can make a claim that he deserves more, but he is a couple of years older as well. And Washington obviously values Terry McLaurin, but not at the numbers that he's currently seeking. And so, again, they can use whatever numbers they want. The Commanders have numbers that they want. The two sides remain apart. Terry McLaurin's back, but a deal is not at hand right now.
All right, Phil, we just saw Cortland Sutton get paid.
Yeah.
And you've been really good about illustrating why this might be complicated for Terry McLaurin and where the differences may be. Is there a number that you have in mind that would make sense here?
It's right around DK Metcalf, and I would argue a shade below. If it were me, and obviously it's not me, but I believe that when you factor in the age, and I think that while Terry McLaurin, who was a second-team All-Pro last year, is a tremendous player, I think the apex of DK Metcalf is a slightly more dangerous player because of the vertical ability for Terry McLaurin. But we're constantly using comps. Amon-Ra St. Brown signed for $30 million per year, Laura, when he did an extension with the Detroit Lions. He was going into the final year of his rookie contract, and it was a couple of years ago. Obviously, the number will continue to go up. A.J. Brown's at $32 million. This position has exploded. At some point, though, you got to peg someone. So I am thinking if I am the Washington Commanders, the area that I'm comfortable is right around or perhaps just a slightly bit lower than DK Metcalf. Yeah. If it were easy, then we would have had this thing done 2 months ago and Shefty would have tweeted about it. Everything would be hunky-dory right now. But when Justin Jefferson's at $35 million, and I think he or Jamar Chase is the best receiver in the NFL, you have to have thresholds if you're a team, because when you have a quarterback who, I get it, he just finished his rookie season. He's going into year 2. You're already pricing out a Jaden Daniels extension. That's what happens when you have a prodigy at quarterback. I love Terry McLaurin. It's also important for a team to find an area that they are comfortable in. I think it's somewhere in that 30, 31, to maybe maximum $33 million per year.
You know, we started with the numbers of how good Terry McLaurin is for Jaden Daniels, right? And that's undeniable. But how important is McLaurin to this offense with the addition of Deebo Samuel? Because that is going to be something new.
He is still incredibly important, and I would argue this is where his leverage comes from. You put up the numbers last year. I like to look at a stat called expected points added, which is basically how much a player contributed towards actually scoring. Terry McLaurin was second amongst all receivers league-wide. No other Commanders receiver was in the top 50. So you add Deebo Samuel, who I think is going to be a seamless fit for Cliff Kingsbury's offense in terms of screen, getting you yards after the catch, working underneath. But that's a completely different part of the field from where Terry McLaurin does his best work. Think about all the go balls we saw Jaden Daniels hit to him in key high-leverage moments last year. There's really no one else on this roster and this depth chart who I look at and see as being able to replicate that. So that, to me, is what Terry McLaurin and his agents are going to be saying in this conversation, even if, as Field says, the Commanders also do have good reason to not want to overpay him given his age and the state of their roster.
Yeah, to your point, McLaurin had a Washington single-season record, 13 touchdown catches last season. It was also the second most in the NFL, behind Jamar Chase's 17.
I train more NFL quarterbacks than anybody in the world, but these young men need help. I can help them. They didn't think we were smart enough to play the quarterback position.
It's like the black athlete story, but it's real.
Quincy has helped me become one of the top 11 quarterbacks in the country.
I've seen the Quincy Avery effect in real time, and you can't deny the results.
You get to write your own story.
Joining us now is the star of the Anscape Hulu documentary, The Quincy Avery Effect. We have Quincy in studio with us. Really cool. This film, by the way, highlights the remarkable rise of black quarterbacks in the NFL, breaking through decades of barriers. When black athletes were told they couldn't excel in the sport's most coveted position. Really cool. Through Quincy's mentorship, we just saw a bunch of these big-name guys. But Jalen Hurts, Justin Fields, C.J. Stroud, Jordan Love, they've shattered those limits. A lot of the credit due to you. So we're so happy to have you in studio here. Let's start with how it all began. How did this private quarterback venture start for you?
I was coaching out at UCLA.
looking at the market, I saw a lot of talented quarterbacks who just were lacking in some physical training. Like, these are the little things and nuances that I need to get going. And I got in my car, drove from UCLA, lived out of my car for a couple of years in Atlanta, reached out to kids on Facebook, and the first client that I got was actually Josh Dobbs, who's now with the New England Patriots.
It is amazing. So what's the process like of identifying and recruiting clients? Because we are seeing more and more quarterback tutors, but how many of them can boast a roster of like the who's who of NFL quarterbacks?
There's a very small list of like top-end quarterback training companies, and I think that fortunate enough to be one of those right now. And now it's like the quarterbacks are more recruiting us. Like, they want to know who they want to work with more so than us reaching out to them. So it's become a really unique industry. Like, the best of the best guys all have somebody who they work with individually.
I've had the great privilege of covering Jalen Hurts all the way from back when he was in college and seeing his transformation and now to being a Super Bowl winning quarterback, just phenomenal. We talk a lot about his growth, right? What more can you add having worked so closely with him?
I think the thing that you want to look at with Jalen more than anything is his perseverance. He's someone who had to go through so much from his time at Alabama, right? Getting benched in the national championship game, coming back the next year, just sitting on the bench, being patient, then going to Oklahoma, taking that team where he took them, and then getting drafted in the second round when everybody was like, hey, he's a fourth, fifth rounder. And he's someone who was so dedicated to doing the little things right. When I talk about just being disciplined and playing the game the right way, Jalen Hurts is that. So no matter where you rank him, 1, 10, 15, 20, right, you know that he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league because he's taking his team to the Super Bowl and he's winning Super Bowl.
For now, and maybe in the case of Jalen Hurts, another 6 months, he'll be with his quarterbacks coach of the Philadelphia Eagles, and his offensive coordinator, his head coach. What's the process like for you? Are you collaborating with these players' respective NFL staffs, or is what you're doing independent of the stuff that they do when they are back in training camp with the Eagles or the Texans or the Jets or the Packers?
It really varies on how good of a relationship you have with that coaching staff, how long you've been working with the player, did the player introduce you to the coaching staff. When you get a team who's really all in on a quarterback, they've really invested a lot, like someone like Gino, that's a coaching staff that I'll talk to all the time with the Las Vegas Raiders. Here's what we're doing. I'll send them videos. They want to be updated on exactly what's going on, how he's progressing, what are the things that we've been doing in the offseason. Sometimes when you're a young guy, a rookie, or in their first couple of years, it's a little bit different, right? You just have to work in silence and hope that it works out, and then you get to start getting connected with that coaching staff so you guys can work together in order to help him reach his goals.
Okay, so Fields spends the majority of his year scouting quarterbacks, evaluating for the NFL draft. Before we let you go, this is going to be a lot of fun. I want you guys to build your ideal quarterback. What are the top attributes that you're looking for? And you guys
This is you.
do
Hey,
this
you know what?
together, but
You wanna
okay. Lead the way.
Yeah, you lead the way.
Okay. I know Mina would like that one, so we'll just roll with
Oh, nice.
CJ Stroud.
Love it.
I feel like CJ.
Their O-line, but find out why someone here believes LA still has gaps to fill to ensure Justin Herbert's safety and success. That's next, right here on NFL Live. We'll be right back. Great job.
Appreciate y'all.
All righty.
Good stuff.
And someone tried to FaceTime me during that.
You see from Adam Schefter, the Titans have now waived injured wide receiver Treylon Burks, who fractured his collarbone over the weekend. Disappointing for sure, because he's a guy that had so much promise and potential, just has not been able to stay healthy. We'll keep an eye on it either way. Let's get to some more top stories with Adam Schefter. Let's start with the quarterback room in Cleveland. Adam, what's going on there?
Well, Laura, over the weekend, Kenny Pickett suffered a hamstring injury. Now, the Browns are saying he's day-to-day with that hamstring injury, but my understanding is he may not test it until later this week at the very earliest, and that clearly could mean more reps for Joe Flacco, Dylan Gabriel, and Shedeur Sanders as they go about trying to somehow find a way to secure the starting Browns quarterback job. But Pickett right now has a hamstring issue. Justin Fields, however, back on the field today, going through 11-on-11 drills days after he dislocated his toe, and looked no worse for the wear, looked comfortable out there. There were people that were petrified when he initially went down, but less than a week later, he's back on the practice field. Good news for the New York Jets as they install their offense. Meanwhile, the Vikings are without Justin Jefferson this week. It's a hamstring injury, which you never like to hear for a wide receiver, certainly not early in the preseason. They say he won't practice this week, and then they'll reevaluate it. But it wouldn't be a surprise if it turned out to be a multi-week hamstring injury for Justin Jefferson at this point. We will not see him for at least the next week. And the former Raiders defensive tackle, Christian Wilkins, right now essentially is being accused of kissing one of his former teammates on the head in a team meeting room. A complaint was filed to the Raiders HR department. This is on top of course, the fact that he did not undergo surgery that he needed on his foot after he suffered a Jones fracture last year. The Raiders released him last week, voided the money. There's a health component. There is another locker room issue. There are a host of series of things going on right here, which is one reason why the Raiders decided to move on. We'll see if and when Christian Wilkins decides to have that surgery and what more comes out of that incident in the Raiders facility last week.
Okay, a complicated story. We'll keep an eye on it for sure. Thanks to Adam for all the latest. Let's get to some more around here. Let's talk about the Chargers a little bit. Now, investing in the offensive line has been a priority since Jim Harbaugh took over as head coach last season. It started at last year's draft when they took tackle Joe Alt with the 5th overall pick. And then this offseason, they signed Super Bowl champion guard Mekhi Becton to a 2-year deal. Then yesterday, they signed tackle Rashawn Slater to an extension, which gives him the largest average annual value ever for a lineman. Well earned. Adam, what more can you tell us about how this Rashawn Slater deal all came down?
Well, the two sides have been engaged in discussions for weeks, Laura. And obviously, like a lot of these negotiations, there was a disagreement over money. But in the end, the Chargers upped the money to make it such that Rashawn Slater is now the highest paid offensive lineman in NFL history. Gets a huge new deal, $114 million extension. And that really locks in their left tackle of the future. And the Chargers have Rashawn Slater manning the left side. They've got Joe Alt manning the right side. At some point in time, you think Joe Alt will get paid, and they're doing everything they can to fortify their offensive line to protect their franchise quarterback, Justin Herbert. But Rashawn Slater now wears the title of the highest paid offensive lineman in NFL history.
Shefty, we love it. I know you've alluded to this several times. What does Jim Harbaugh call quality offensive linemen? He calls them weapons, right? Weapons. And that's what Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt are. I think you can make a case that for the next half decade, perhaps even beyond, there's no tackle duo that you would want more than Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt. This is a premium position. You have a quarterback who Jim Harbaugh has made clear. He feels as though the biggest issue Justin Herbert has faced is everything else around him, not Justin Herbert himself. And one more thought, Laura. We've talked about the draft a lot. I will continue to do so until April 23rd in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Sometimes during the pre-draft process, and we did this certainly with a guy like Will Campbell during this past draft process, we get so focused on things like measurements, arm lengths, and Rashawn Slater, 33-inch arms coming out of Northwestern. Is he going to be a guard? Could he ever play left tackle in the NFL? Exceptional players deserve exceptions. Yeah. Good to see a player like Rashawn Slater recognized and now handsomely, more so than any other offensive lineman in NFL history, paid.
I love it. I'm happy for him. Mina, you were at Chargers camp last week. Give us a little inside scoop. What did you see from the Chargers offense?
This isn't going to sound like a very sophisticated football analysis, but they are big. There are some large humans out there.
Yeah.
Mekhi Becton, you talked about, gigantic. Trey Harris, their second-round receiver, huge. And Omarion Hampton, who's the back they took in the first round, I walked by him and physically did a double take. One of the Chargers coaches saw me and said, yeah, that happens a lot when people see Omarion Hampton on the field. And all of this matters because I think they addressed what were a couple of their biggest weaknesses last year. For all the talk about Jim Harbaugh wanting to run the ball, this team was 29th in rushing success rate, efficiency metric last season. So they clearly had to get better there. And then interior pressure. Field and Adam talked about how great Rashawn Slater is, but the interior of the Chargers offensive line was a weakness. Justin Herbert was under pressure in 50% of his dropbacks in the playoff game where they lost. So I think the Becton addition could be just as impactful, both in terms of limiting those quick pressures up the middle, but also helping in the ground.
Quick fantasy. People should be drafting Omarion Hampton, right?
Whew. Don't tell anybody. Not if you're playing in my league. You shouldn't.
Wait, I think I'm going to play against Field in a league. This little teaser. I'm drafting Omarion Hampton. You're not getting it.
I heard he hates dogs. That's actually a lie, people, but just if you're playing in a league with me.
I love it. All right, more to come here on NFL Live. When we come back, Baker Mayfield may have one of the most underrated skill groups in the Year's camp. What's up, Graz? How's Baker Mayfield handling yet another change at offensive coordinator?
Laura, I spoke with Baker Mayfield after practice this morning, and I asked him about that. He laughed. You know, he's got a lot of different coordinators, but he said this one's different. Josh Grizzard is the new coordinator here. He was on the staff last year, and he has a relationship with Baker Mayfield. They were in all the same meetings together, and Grizzard was actually the coordinator of their third down passing offense. So Baker really feels like they're hitting the ground running here, even if he's going to make a couple tweaks here and there, because it's basically the same system. Head coach Todd Bowles told me he thinks Baker's been great out here. He said the thing with Baker's been great since we got him. Just cut down on those picks, and he can be elite. Mayfield, of course, coming off a 16-interception season. He's going to have a lot of help if he wants to be elite, and one of the guys that's going to help him is rookie wide receiver Emeka Egbuka, the team's first-round pick. Everybody here is raving about him, his football intelligence. Todd Bowles told me his football IQ is like that of a fourth- or fifth-year veteran. And they're going to need it because Chris Godwin's still working his way back from that season-ending injury from last year. But once Godwin's back, Mike Evans, Egbuka, the running backs, this is a Tampa offense that looks pretty loaded.
Thanks, Graz. Yeah, the Bucs pass and run game were very strong last season. They ranked third in pass yards per game, fourth in rush yards per game. They were the only team to rank top 5 in both categories. They also ranked 6th in yards per attempt and 3rd in yards per rush. The only running backs that averaged more yards per carry than Bucky Irving last season was Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, and Jahmyr Gibbs. Even more impressive that they did this dealing with so many injuries. Chris Godwin went down. They had a lot to deal with. All right, Field, How do you think the Bucs are able to have so much success on offense, and can that continue into this season?
It can. You talked about how explosive they were last year. The only team in the top 5 in both rushing yards per game and passing yards per game. I think there are 2 other factors, Laura, and sort of each contributes to that explosive play nature. First of all, they have great depth. There were times, going into this season, once Chris Godwin gets healthy, Jalen McMillan, who shined at times last year, their 3rd-round pick out of Washington a year ago, probably the 4th wide receiver on this depth chart because we expect Emeka Egbuka to play a substantial role. A guy like Cade Otton is a totally serviceable starting tight end who might be 6th or 7th in targets. The backfield, they have some depth behind Bucky Irving. But because of the fact that they have so many explosive playmakers and they have players that can get the job done in gotta-have-it situations, like when they need to play power football behind, I believe, an adept offensive line once Tristan Wirfs is back and healthy, this team is sort of situationally ready regardless of what is ahead of them, right? This is not a team that needs to constantly play from ahead of the sticks. No team likes to play from behind the sticks, Mina, but because of the diverse personnel and the fact that they are so explosive, it's pretty rare for Tampa to find itself in a precarious spot that they can't eventually dig themselves out of.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite offenses in football to watch last year. For all the reasons Field described, the play sequencing, the way they used personnel groupings to get mismatches. This is the best 21 personnel team in football quietly last season when they used Bucky Irving and Rashad White on the field at the same time. But something that Dan said there triggered something for me. I wanted to look up. He mentioned their new offensive coordinator, Josh Grizzard, was responsible for the 3rd down passing offense. While he was saying it, looked it up. The 3rd down passing offense was 2nd league-wide in success rate and 3rd in EPA per play. So while he's a bit of an unknown, that bodes well for continuity. But, of course, the most important thing is that he's been given this set of players to work with, because I would put the Bucs skill players and offensive line up with just about any unit in the NFL, frankly.
We'd be remiss if we talked about the Bucs and didn't mention Mike Evans, too, who was another one that was injured throughout the season last year. He looks healthy, should be good to go. Let's talk a little bit more about the NFC South, just in general, right? According to ESPN Analytics, the Bucs have a 49% chance of winning their 5th straight NFC South title. Their 4th straight is currently the longest active streak in the NFC. The Falcons have the next highest chance to win the division at 24%. The Panthers have the longest drought in the division with their last title coming in 2015. Panthers quarterback Bryce Young looking to end Carolina's drought, hoping to pick up where they left off last season. He spoke to the media today.
Just want to be consistent, ups or downs, good games, bad games, regardless of the situation. Just want to be consistent in my work. And just because I was consistent in the past, I got to challenge myself every day to be just as, if not more, consistent. So that's the journey.
I just want to see Bryce continue to master the offense, use his tools. He's doing a great job there, getting to some of his signals and checks versus the right looks. He's really dialed in that way. Bryce is giving us the ability to continue to expand what we're doing, and that's the high hope, really.
What improvements have you seen from Bryce Young, especially when he won the job back last season?
First of all, just to weather the storm is remarkable, right? I think a lot of guys, if they were the 1st overall pick, who a team trade a bounty of picks to get, and then gets benched 18 starts into his career, bye-bye. We might never see that player meaningfully play again. Bryce Young at the end of last season looked very, very sharp, like the kind of guy you could build an offense around. I'm excited for a couple of reasons about this offense, Laura. One is they have 3 players last year that were rookies for them. Obviously, Xavier Legette, their 1st-round pick, plus Jatavian Sanders, a tight end in the 4th round, and then Jalen Coker, an undrafted free agent. All those guys should make legitimate progress this year. I think Tetairoa McMillan, the 8th overall pick, though, gives them a little bit more sort of passing game versatility. They needed, not that you can find too many players that are 6'4" and 219 pounds like T-Mac is, but they desperately needed some size. And sometimes in the red zone, and Dave Canales comes from 2 prior stops being Tampa Bay and Seattle. Guys like Mike Evans and DK Metcalf. And sometimes red zone, throw down, what do you do?
Get it.
Find that guy and just throw it this way. And I think Tetairoa McMillan offers some of that to Bryce Young. It's going to take time for any new quarterback and wide receiver to develop in a rapport. But I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of this preseason, Bryce Young's confidence has grown in Tetairoa McMillan that, the old saying, 50-50 balls aren't really 50-50 balls for T-Mac, just based off what we saw at Arizona. And I'm trying to be judicious when watching preseason highlights so far and training camp highlights, but a couple of the throws and catches I've seen so far between these two give me some confidence already.
So good. As you know, Field, Adam Thielen was the Panthers' leading receiver last season, just 615 yards out of him. So they should be better. All right, still to come. The Cowboys.
Ngày hôm nay mình sẽ tiếp tục đi tô màu để cho các bạn có những phút giây thư giãn khi xem video của mình. Và để làm được video này mình cần chuẩn bị những dụng cụ như sau. Đương nhiên sẽ không thể thiếu được, đây là điện thoại để quay lại quá trình mình thao tác te. Và đây là bút sáp màu mình dùng để tô màu. Và đây là những sản phẩm được mình chuẩn bị sẵn để mình dùng để tô màu. Bây giờ mời các bạn cùng theo dõi quá trình mình tô màu. Và các bạn hãy ấn like và đăng ký kênh để ủng hộ mình nhé. Cảm ơn các bạn rất là nhiều.
Mình sẽ đi vào chi tiết các dáng nha. Tô màu nha. Không, nhanh, đừng có đừng làm, trong đây nó quay hết vào video người. Bảo ăn nhanh để đi học. Yên, đây con một, có biết mình không hả? Con một yên, yên hay yên? Mẹ khiêng đò lên cho bố quay bàn hay là mẹ khiêng? Mẹ khiêng. Mẹ bị mưa đầu, vì là mẹ bị mưa rơi vào đầu. Rồi hẳn mưa rơi vào đầu, mẹ bị vỗ hẳn cái đầu của mẹ, nhanh nhanh mẹ đi rửa đầu. Nhà đây lo tay. Không ăn một cái nữa. Thôi đừng ăn nữa, đi đi sang mẹ cho mẹ ăn để ăn cái này kia. Yên. Mẹ kia. Không thích ở đâu. Lên. Đặt xong một trang này. Ra. Xong một đó. Không à. Hết. Làm xong tỏ mai làm tỏ kêu. Mai bố không đi chơi đâu. Nhanh lên. Đi rồi. Cái này làm nhanh mà lại bị lười. Đừng có tỏ buộc cái cãi họ tỏ bố mà cũng học nha. Nào đổ sách ra. Mẹ 3-4 bài tập cũng lại lười trong buổi đó. Nào, khoanh vào đi. Nhanh lên. Nhanh lên. Gì đây? Không biết đọc là gì đây? Nhanh.
Trở lại như vậy tôi mở cái đá thòng nha. Xin chào bạn em, hôm nay mình sẽ cái đánh này là gọi xài, bây giờ mình sẽ cái đánh này gọi xem.
Chữ cái đây đi. Ngồi thay vào mua. Mang một tí. Đứng cái này mình. Vậy không? Bây giờ của mình kết thúc nha. Chào mừng các